I'm with my brew crew, Eric Brusher and Noah Jones. How are we doing today, fellas?
Really excited to be able to interview easily one of my favorite breweries that we've ever interviewed before. And I know I've said that a lot of times, but I just have a lot of real excitement for this particular podcast.
Yeah, and I think Louis is very excited as well. So glad to be in Cincinnati again, and we'll be going down the road checking this out.
Yeah.
Noah, do you remember when we started this podcast who you wanted to talk to?
I do. I not only remember that we had this conversation where I said that I want to talk to the 23rd largest brewery, craft brewery in the country. And do you remember what you said?
That would be a dream come true.
And what are we doing today, man?
Where dreams do come true some days.
That's right. Rhinegeist.
Rhinegeist.
Here we come. We'll see you there.
See you there.
See you guys.
1, 2, 3, go!
I'm thrilled to announce that we have Chris Shields, Director of Education of Rhinegeist. Chris Shields, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we're really thrilled to have you. You guys have been one of my favorite breweries in the world, I guess I can say, for a long time. My mom moved to Cincinnati a few years before I did, and one of the very first places she took me was your guys' roof, and it's just a fantastic atmosphere, and I really think very highly of Rhinegeist.
Well, awesome. That's lovely to hear.
Yeah.
And of course, we're very excited to be here right before the 10-year anniversary party this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys got to see behind the curtain a little bit with some of the all the worker bees. People from all different departments kind of coming together and trying to put together something that it's. So the anniversary party the theme is basically 10 years of truth. So we've been making truth our flagship beer since we opened, and it's the beer that built Rhinegeist, and so we're kind of celebrating that a little bit. We're going to have some, we sat down with the Brewing Heritage Trail folks, and there's going to be some cool images and documents showing kind of the history of this neighborhood and of this building. And we also have like a little bit of kind of a museum set up, almost like walking through the 10 years of Rhinegeist and kind of what we've done and what we're all about. So, whether you've been a fan of Rhinegeist since day one or, last week or never, you can kind of walk through and see, this kind of crazy ride that we've been on.
That's awesome. And so the actual celebration is on Saturday, right?
Yeah, this Saturday, June 17th. So depending on when this airs, hopefully that wasn't in the past, but it likely will be. But hopefully all your listeners were here and had a great time.
Yes, all 8 of no, just kidding. Yeah, totally.
There's dozens of us.
I love that show. Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about what you do for Rhinegeist as the Director of Education.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a uncommon title, I'll say, but a lot of the things I do are things that are very common at any brewery. Kind of packaging them the way that we have is maybe a little bit unique. I joined Rhinegeist a little over 8 years ago as a brewer. So my background's on the production side in making beer. I moved to Cincinnati from North Carolina, was looking around. I was working at a brewery before that, and kind of was fortunate to find a place at Rhinegeist. And as Rhinegeist continued to grow and expand and just really, there was a couple years of really dramatic growth for the company. We realized that one of the things that we value is education and knowledge and understanding, and we feel strongly that an educated consumer is going to make better choices for themselves. If they know what they like and they understand styles and beer and flavor a little bit, then they can better choose what they're going to enjoy, especially with more and more choices out in the marketplace. And that really began with educating our own team. We realized we can't expect all of our, fans and consumers to be educated if we're not there ourselves. So I had some background in education. I've gone through some of the Cicerone program and various other sort of beer-centric education programs. And so I really started with just doing education for our team. And honestly, it's something that we were doing even before I joined. Jim Matt, who's our founding head brewer, now our chief science officer, he was running kind of weekly tasting and education sessions where it was all over the board, right? It might be a new beer that we had, and it's just like, hey, everybody meet at the bar at 3:00 on Wednesday, and we're going to taste through this, and I'm going to tell you about it. Or maybe he would go out and buy a bunch of Hefeweizens, and we could talk about that style, right? Or talk about dry hopping and what that process is, and taste a beer. Okay, this is before it was dry hopped. This is after. So it really started from that organic nature.
Are these classes for the public?
These were just for our
your
team.
staff? Okay.
Yeah, and it was basically just, whoever's around, whoever's interested. There were far fewer of us at that point. And people would just jump in. But as we continued to be busy, it was harder for someone on the production team to manage those projects. So I sort of dropped off of the brewing team and became sort of team of one education and started training our team, and then that spawned kind of working with some bars and restaurants as we grew, working with wholesalers and distributors that we partner with, and then doing some stuff for the public as well. In addition to that, I do a lot of things kind of more behind the scenes here, meetings, emails, all those exciting things that everyone gets to do. But the way I like to describe it, especially to people that are a little bit familiar with the industry, like y'all and friends at other breweries, is I spend a lot of my time kind of translating back and forth between the production side and the sales and marketing side. And, everybody has the same goal, but, there's different vocabulary, different language, and different messaging around really the same thing. So one of the big things that we're really passionate about, in addition to general education, is we want to be open. So one of the things I do is I read through all the material that goes on our cans or on a lot of our signage and advertising material to say, like, not just is this accurate, but is this portraying what we want? And that's a little bit of having that production background allows me to help do that.
That's really interesting, and for our listeners, they're probably rolling their eyes because I always mention that I have a journalism background, but in this case, it's very pertinent. So I went to a conference in Chicago at one point, and I sat in on this woman from, I can't remember what company it was, but it was one of those like cooking videos that were like, every video they made was viral, right? And it was like that kind where it's like over the dish, so you can't see, all you see are the hands like mixing the flour and whatever. And she was saying that basically it was really important for every social media post they had to have sort of the same voice. So they the whole company, Cook Now or whatever. I'm making it up, but they all have the same sort of voice. So no matter what, they're always pretending to be this character. Is that sort of what you do as well for your packaging, where you're not necessarily being John Q. Public beer lover, but you're making sure that it's always like a cool sounding or happy or whatever? Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Yeah, not as much. I mean, we do have that to some extent. So, for example, any tasting notes, like if you go on our blog and see there's blog reviews for certain beers, the same person generally writes all of those because, one, he's our sensory specialist, and that's part of his responsibility and role is to develop and write those tasting notes. But to what you said, it helps to have this is his name's Travis, shout out. Okay, Travis wrote this, like you can see it, and it says in the post, like, hey, this was written by Travis, our sensory specialist. So it's a little bit of that connection as well. Like with our social media, that's a big thing. I'm not directly involved in most of the social media posts, but we have a small team that works on those, and they sit right over there. Sorry for the audio only audience, but that's a big advantage, I think, for us, is that it's a few people that are kind of participating in that, and they're all putting a little bit of themselves into it. But as you said, also being cognizant of like, hey, it's Rhinegeist as well. Like it's something that we are. We're not trying to be a character, but we're trying to be authentic to who Rhinegeist is, and that can be hard, especially over a long time. I'm, certainly our voice has probably changed a little bit over the years. We've had different people speaking, but we try to kind of stay true. Behind you on the wall that I'm looking at is we have a vision and a mission, and these are relatively new things for us to kind of add some focus and say like, hey, does this fit with who we are and what we want to do? When we do, like our charitable donations and charitable partnerships, like we have pillars that of different types of organizations that we like to support. Sure, that gives some sort of grounding and guidelines to what we support and what we don't, because we can't. I'm sure you can imagine, like we can't support everything that comes across our plate, but by having some structure, it allows us to be focused and we think make a bigger impact in those specific areas than just throwing a free T-shirt at every organization that wants one. Not to say that that's still a free T-shirt, right? Like, but it's
one person happy,
right? But it's like, what can we do to kind of keep that focused?
Gotcha. So let's talk a little bit about your 10-year anniversary. You've already sort of spoken about it a little bit. I think, Blake, you want to take this one?
So let's start back in your journey back in 2005. Give us a quick history lesson on back then and how you got to the point of when you guys opened.
Sure. Yeah. It always makes me laugh that it is kind of funny maybe that the story starts in 2005 when it's 2023 and I'm talking about our 10th anniversary. But that the math is not, it doesn't quite work out, at least at first. But that's really when our two founders, Bob Bonder and Brian Goulding, really first connected. And they were living out in California, in the Bay Area, and they were both working outside of beer. They were working sort of in the business world as consultants and bouncing around, doing all these jobs. And to hear them talk about it, it's like they spend all this time and effort and energy for somebody else, and with sort of a intangible result. And they both kind of started to get that itch to build something of their own. Now they weren't planning to do anything together at this point, but they were friends. They were buddies, and they would get together after work. And 2005 in San Francisco, there's a lot of good beer out in that area, so they're getting into craft beer. They're drinking craft beer. Eventually, they kind of part ways a little bit. Bob actually moves to Cincinnati after a couple of years and starts a coffee company called Tazamia. We like to joke it takes a lot of coffee to make beer. There's a classic wine joke that it takes a lot of good beer to make good wine. So it all sort of rolls around there. And so he started a coffee roasting company and had a couple coffee shops. And again, at the end of the day, was, hitting some of the early breweries in Cincinnati, the early modern breweries in Cincinnati, and having beer and thinking about craft. And Bryant actually got involved in working on the sales and marketing side for some breweries while he was still out in California. He worked for Anderson Valley, he worked for Dogfish Head, he worked for a couple other breweries out in that area, and was really kind of getting connected to the industry. So a couple more years go by. Bob sort of realizes like, hey, I've built this coffee thing here, but what I'd really like to do is put a brewery in downtown and particularly in OTR, in the neighborhood that we're in over the Rhine. And he starts thinking about it and talking about it, and he meets, Jim Matt, who's homebrewing and working at another brewery in town, and he was working at Sun King out in Indianapolis. They've always been a great kind of big brother to us. They're a little older than us, our older brother. They were a great resource for us when we were getting started. But eventually, 2011, 2012 maybe, Bob gets really kind of serious about doing this, and he calls Bryant out or calls him up on the phone. And it's like, hey, come visit Cincinnati. Neither of them are from here. They're both from kind of the East Coast, but Bob has fallen in love. He moved out here and he fell in love with Cincinnati, and it's something that's
easy to do.
It's something. It's what I did, so I get it. And he calls Brian out. Brian's staying on his couch, He's like, it's going to be like a couple days. And Bryant kind of has a similar experience. He sees the potential of this city and this area. And that just really got the ball rolling with starting a brewery. And then eventually they came and saw this space, and that's really what sealed the deal. It's like, okay, we have to figure out how to do this. So then it was, find some investors and get this thing off the ground. And so that was, by then it was early 2013. We actually have 2 of our employees have already celebrated their 10-year work anniversaries, even though the brewery hasn't yet. We celebrate the brewery's anniversary when we opened to the public, but we had beer when we opened. Mm-hmm. So Jim Madd, who I mentioned, he was our employee number 1. We actually did a little small batch beer that we named employee number 1, kind of after him in March, which was his 10-year anniversary. And then Luke was employee number 2, basically, and he kind of wrapped around on his 10-year anniversary in May. So we're getting to that point where them opening in this space and seeing that success it's really pretty wild to see all that's come from, to some extent, just that drive to make something and be able to have something in your hand and hold it. It's something that also drew me to the brewing world on the production side, is being able to say, I had a long day and I'm hot and sweaty, but I made that, and I get to share it with people. And that was always a really powerful thing for me. And I think that's a really powerful thing in general for Rhinegeist. And whether you're working on the production side, the lab, packaging, brewing, or you're on the sales side or the marketing side or bartending, it's all for that goal of getting somebody to have a beer or have some type of beverage and have a great experience. If you're working in the tap room, like, you want someone to come in here and have a good time. Yeah, we'd love for them to buy some beers, but really want them to have a good time. Mm-hmm. So that kind of translates, in that entrepreneurial spirit, that sort of drive to just be creative, be innovative, and kind of keep the experience in mind has really driven what we try to do.
I think we probably have the majority of our listeners are home brewers themselves. And so I just think that story is really incredible, how, you've gone from being, you were at one point created by sort of like a make your own success story there, and now you're like the 23rd biggest brewery in the country. I mean, it's truly incredible. Yeah, I mean, Truth is based on one of Jim's homebrew recipes. I mean, that is like, there's a direct lineage from, I don't know, like 2010 or 2011 homebrew recipe and Truth still. Jim is still very involved in a lot of our beers, but Truth and some of the ones that we've been making for a long time, like Uncle, those were his homebrews. And there's a bunch of, several other beers of ours came from, whether they were homebrew ideas of some of our other brewers, or just that kind of attitude of just having an idea, figuring out how to make it work, and then sometimes challenging the sales team to say, like, okay, cool, like, we think this is really good. You convince everyone else that it is too, and get them to try it.
Okay, talk about beer. Which beer do you want to start with? And
yeah, so let's start with this first one. It's called Beer for Humans.
Hey, we're humans. I like that.
Yeah, I figured that was a good place to start.
Yeah.
We call this a easy hop ale, which is, it's both made up but also not made up, because it is what it is, right? I think sometimes people read that name and they're like, I don't know what that is. I'm like, just think it's an easy hop ale. That's it. That's all there is to it. Yep. The idea here was just to make something that's really approachable. We also have an American lager that's very approachable called Cheetah, mm-hmm. but we wanted something that was, that is really designed to be, just classic American style lager. Whereas this is like one more step towards, the kind of craft beer that got most of us interested in beer. But, I'm the old guy around here. As wild as that is to say, a a lot of people now grew up with craft beer in a way that I didn't. And having something like this that's very approachable, very just, it's funny. It's complexity wise, there's a lot there, but when you drink it, it just makes sense, right? It's got a little bit of hop aroma. It's not bitter. It's kind of this weird hybrid. Like it's a little bit of a blonde ale. It's a little bit of a, session IPA almost. It's only 4.5%, but it doesn't have that bitterness. It has some nice malt character, has a ton of hop aroma, and that's it. And then the story behind this beer is it's kind of the showcase for our charitable efforts. So Beer for Humans is also what we call kind of our community wing. All of the groups that we have in on Wednesdays to come and do like pint nights, and all of the broader donation and charitable volunteer work that we do, all is sort of under that banner of Beer for Humans. And one thing that I think is really neat is our marketing team came up with this idea to actually, about every few months, this beer comes in 15 packs. And on that 15 pack, we have pictures and information about some of the charities we work with. And the idea isn't, buy this beer and, money goes to, whatever X dollars goes to these charities. We're sort of doing that on our own, right? Mm-hmm. But the idea is, hey, person who likes Rhinegeist and is a Beer for Humans drinker, you check these groups out. Maybe you want to volunteer. Maybe you want to get involved. Maybe there's an organization that speaks to you and something you're passionate about. And there's a QR code on the can. There's a QR code on the 15 pack. You can go right to our website. You can donate directly to those charities and just see what they're doing. And that's been really fun for us. This is a relatively new program, the name and the beer. But it's been a really cool way to kind of showcase the partners that we have and the community that we are proud to be a part of.
I don't want to get too far away from the conversation we were having about Rhinegeist's history, especially this part in particular. I saw on your website that this building used to belong to Moorline, which is incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so originally this building and about 3 full city blocks of this area was Christian Moorline Brewing. And this is sort of the first iteration of Christian Moorline. Folks that are familiar with Cincinnati beer now, there's the Lager House down at the banks, and there's Christian Moorline Brewing that was a couple blocks south of us. Separate from that, Christian Moorline was a man named Christian Moorline. I was like, he was a man. He was a human.
Also a human.
Also a human. There's humans everywhere in these stories. But yeah, so he was a German immigrant, and with many other German immigrants, lived in this neighborhood called Over the Rhine, and worked at a brewery that he founded. And by some accounts, this brewery before Prohibition was making like 300,000 barrels of beer a year, which is like 3 times what we're making as you said, 23rd largest craft brewery in the country. So an enormous amount of beer. I mean, like I said, our facility was their packaging building. Mm-hmm. It was like barrels and bottling. The brew house was in a separate building. Everything was in separate buildings. There were stables and lagering tunnels and caves everywhere. But Christian Moorline Brewing didn't survive Prohibition in the way that some of the German named breweries that are still around that everyone is familiar with are in Milwaukee, in St. Louis, yeah, right, Colorado. Those breweries survived, and Christian Moorline didn't. But this building survived.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. We're in, most of this building is, or a big chunk of this building was like 1880s, I think, and then the new part is from like 1906, which is kind of wild to think about. But yeah, I mean, it's been really cool to see, and those of you that have been, I know you guys all have, but anybody who's been into the tap room can see that we try to honor some of that. We didn't cover everything up. We wanted to give some of that view to history, and that even speaks to our name, Rhinegeist. It's Rhine from over the Rhine, and Geist being ghost or spirit. We also like puns, so spirit and alcohol is also a pun.
Very nice.
Sort of double meaning there, but
Yeah.
but it speaks to that, like, hey, there's a lot of brewing history, not just in this building, in this neighborhood, but in the Midwest, and a lot of that was lost after Prohibition.
Cool.
I'll never forget my first time when you walk up those stairs, you just see that massive hall. It's like, oh wow. Then you go around the corner, see your massive brewery. It's like, oh wow,
Yeah, it's one of the things that, as like, our employees love to sit in the tap room at the end of the day, maybe having a shift beer, and watch people. You can always tell the people that it's their first time here, because they do exactly what you said. They pop up from the top of the steps, and it's like, whoa.
It's sort of innocuous. I mean, from the inside, you would have no idea how grand and,
Yeah.
and like massive this is. It's. I mean, I remember. I mean, I don't remember my first time, but I do remember sort of that feeling of
probably don't
like,
remember walking.
where am I? Because it's. I mean, again, like you sort of. I mean, you can see that like it's a big building from the outside, but you don't really know like how big rooms are, right, from
Right.
the outside.
Yeah. I mean, our tap room is like 25,000 square feet. Just the tap room. Like that's the last brewery I worked at in North Carolina before I moved up here. The whole thing was 7,000 square feet.
What was it?
It was a place called Mystery. It's gone now. But it was a much smaller, like 7-barrel kind of production brew house in the Triangle area.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Cincy Reigns will be distributed just as college football season comes around. Can you tell us a little bit about that beer and how that came about, that NIL deal and all that?
Yeah, so Cincy Light is the name of the beer, and we're really excited about it. Actually, Adam, our current CEO, is a UC alum, and I think the entirety of our design department, that made it sound really big, but all our marketing and design is done in-house. And for folks that don't know, University of Cincinnati has an amazing design program called DAP, and a lot of our graphic designers, a lot of our marketing team are graduates from DAP. And so this is one of these things where Cincy Reigns is the organization that sort of manages the NIL fund, and they really came to us and were interested in doing something, and a bunch of conversations, probably a few beers, and we sort of landed on this partnership with Cincy Light. And it's our first time doing a light lager, which we're really excited about. It's something that on the production side we've been sort of itching to do for a long time, and but we wanted to find the right avenue for it, and I think this is it. Our design team, anybody that's seen the can design, it looks really slick. It's going to be in 12 packs, and basically the way that it works is there's some of the money from every 12 pack goes into the Cincy Reigns fund, and then that's used to manage kind of NIL appearances and things like that for athletes at University of Cincinnati.
That really is. I mean, it's a big deal because right now it seems as though schools like Alabama or LSU especially has several athletes that are like making so much more money than they will when they go pro. So it's a real almost like competitive edge to be able to say like we've got some NIL money for athletes. So I mean, kudos to you all, I think, for doing that. But it's also really cool to get to sort of be a part of the team, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really neat too, because one of the things that honestly even I didn't realize is there's sort of like the really high level NIL deals that you hear about, and we're direct with a big company or something like that. But so much of it is things like athletes going and doing a community event, but then the NIL can give them some money to do that, pay their gas or give them some money for dinner. And so it not only provides some of that funding for growing the success ideally of UC athletics, but it helps these athletes be more involved in the community, because there's, I don't necessarily want to say incentive, but to some extent there is, right? I mean, if you're an athlete, certainly I'm not, but I had friends that were athletes in college, and they have no time. Everything is scheduled out, and they're busy, and they got school, they've got practice, they got games, they got travel, and so maybe they want to go and do some event or show up at some party or something like that, a fundraising party or something like for a charity that they believe in, but they can't. In the past, they couldn't get anything for that, and so they had to sacrifice their limited time. And I had a lot of friends that were athletes that worked, had a part-time job, and so like this can be their part-time job, and it can help them and help grow the success of UC athletics. And I'll be the first to say that I hope that people are talking about the rampant success of this, because I've tasted some of the test batches of the beer. It's exactly coming out how we want. Just really crushable, approachable lager. 4.2%, low calorie, easy drinking, and it's a way to really support. I'm not from here. I didn't grow up a Bearcats fan, but just the community aspect of it is really exciting.
For sure.
Okay, let's go to our second.
Yeah, so that's a great segue there. This is table beer, so it's not Cincy Light.
I got really excited.
I know. I'm sorry. I realized how that came out. It's not quite ready for public consumption.
I think that's what Blake thought too.
This is a beer called table beer, and so it's that community aspect. It's sort of in that Belgian tradition of like having a beer that's just regular beer for enjoying. This is 4.5%, but it comes from our fooders down in the basement. So it's a fooder aged grisette. Fooder is basically a big oak barrel. Technically part of our Outer Reaches, like Wild and Sour beer program, but the idea is that this is just an easy beer to share with friends. It's great with food. It's great on its own. You can have a few. It's not overwhelming. Luke, who runs that program, likes to talk about approachable complexity. And I think this beer is really the poster for that philosophy.
Yeah, great words to describe it.
Yeah, for sure. I've had this before in your tap room, and I really like it. For whatever reason, every time I take a sip, I think of like being a monk. So you really sort of just like, even though I didn't know the background, I truly did think that. Talk to us a little bit about like what we're tasting.
Yeah, so this beer has it's made with mixed culture. So there's some wild yeast, Brettanomyces in here. There's some lactic acid bacteria in here, but it's all relatively subtle. So the beer is super dry. There's some grains in here, like beyond sort of malted barley. There's a little bit of spelt in here to give it some character. Not much hop, but then this beer gets aged in that fooder. And in that fooder, that wild yeast, that bacteria really, really dries it out. So this beer is extremely dry. And then that sort of, there's a little bit of like a leathery, funky, pineapple-y character. All that comes from the Brettanomyces. So I love that sort of leathery, funkiness. And the sourness varies. So the other thing about this is we make this beer all the time, but as it ages, it's not pasteurized. We're not doing anything to it. So the older the batch, the more sour, to a certain extent, it gets. So
that's interesting.
My wife, for example, she loves it when it's really sour. So she's always like, when she comes in here, she's like, all right, how old is the table beer that's on tap right now? I'm like, just drink one, but it's fun because it's this different experience, and it's very much that artistic expression of taking these simple raw ingredients, giving them to these microorganisms, and giving them time. This is not a fast beer to make. It's not, it doesn't have a ton of hops. It's not, high ABV. So that, those are things that generally make things more expensive, but it's a little bit more expensive to make because of the time. And then we do sell this in bottles, but we only sell the bottles here at the brewery. So draft, you can find few places around town, but if you want bottles of this, you got to come to the brewery. You got to come visit us and have it here.
It's well worth your
So
time.
it reminds me of like an open fermentation beer, like you see some. Is that how you guys do it? Open fermentation.
It's not a true open fermentation, but it is. It does spend time in that big oak foeder with those wild cultures, and we use basically a Solera method. So we drain that foeder of the first batch, but we leave about 10% behind, and so then the next batch goes in. All that yeast and bacteria are still in there, ready to kickstart. So it provides some continuity with the brand, but also, it keeps that sort of culture going and brings that Brett character, that sourness along a little bit quicker. And it's just a really fun way to play. It is a very traditional, in a lot of ways, our version of a very traditional Belgian style.
Okay.
Now, when you were first starting out here and going out to restaurants, did you have any pushback when it came, because you're going into a world that was, mainly domestic at that time? Did you see any pushback to, craft beer, I don't know if this will work with our customers?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we did. I wasn't boots on the ground with our sales team at that time. But one of the things that really worked for us and for this really part of the country is that people care about their community here. And so for us to be able to say, like, come visit us. We're down the street, we're down the road, we're down the block, whatever. And people did. And they could see that it was their neighbors that work here. And the beer was made with care. And not to say that we never made mistakes or never made a batch of beer that we weren't proud of. We do our best to make sure none of that gets anywhere close to anybody's lips. But it's that ability to say, like, hey, like, give this a try. Most people are willing to give something a try. And our team does a really good job of understanding, okay, walk into a bar or a restaurant and they can kind of see, like, okay, what's the vibe in here? Mm-hmm. What that we make is going to fit this environment. They're not right every time. There's always these, like, wild places where there's, like, some dive bar that sells a whole bunch of, like, wild and sour beer, which isn't what you would expect. But sometimes it's just the guy who runs the bar or the woman who's the beer buyer. That's what they like. And so that's what they tell their customers to try. And people try it. So much of exploring and understanding beer is just trying new things. And people around here are generally willing to do that. And that really helped us grow. Also getting our name and our cans into the grocery stores and convenience stores around helped as well, because people would say, oh, Rhinegeist, I've seen that, or I've heard of that. It definitely gives us some credibility. It gives us some better reach. But yeah, I mean, having that little bit of openness, all our cans say Cincy made on there. Mm-hmm. And that's, we're really proud of that. We're proud that our beer is from here and we're selling it here. And we self-distribute our beer in Cincinnati and Columbus. And that means that it's our people. It's people that work directly for Rhinegeist that are making those visits to bars and restaurants. And I think that helps us really connect with those customers.
Talk to me how you got into Schmidt's over in Columbus. I understand you guys make a lot of their beers. How did you get that?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know all the history of that, but Schmidt's is just this awesome, like, German beer hall and restaurant and, like, butcher shop basically. And we for a long time sold a lot of beer there. And then eventually they said, hey, you guys do a really good job making these kind of classic German styles, which is funny because given our name, sometimes people are like, oh, what do you make, only German style beer? And it's like, no, our flagship is a West Coast IPA. but we do think that we do a pretty good job with these kind of classic styles. And there's a beer that we've made for a long time called Steve. It's a black lager or Schwartz beer. And they had that on tap, and they were like, this is just, it's really doing well. And so they talked to our sales team, we worked with them, and we make a couple beers that they're basically their house beers. you can find them at some other places, but that's kind of what. And for them, it's great because they're like, hey, these beers were made for us, and they were. But there's opportunity to try those. You can get them in the tap room here and things like that. Some places around town. We have a kind of a Munich Helles style pale lager, and we have the sort of dark lager, black lager.
Okay, so when Ohio legalized sports gambling, pretty much right away we got news that you guys put a sports book in here.
Yeah, it was kind of a wild and fortuitous sort of partnership. They came to us and said, hey, we're looking for places to do these promotions and kind of get word out about what we're doing. And we were kind of looking at anybody who's been into our space recently and has seen the sort of the little like corner, the sports corner. That was kind of an underutilized space for a long time. And we had the idea to, put a bunch of TVs in there, put a bunch of plugs for people's phones and just kind of make it a little area. We haven't always been, other than like major sporting events, we weren't really a place that people came to watch, whatever, every game or any sporting event that they might want. And so being able to have some extra TVs, getting some more channels,
Mm-hmm.
and then really following along from putting the big TV in that was kind of coincided with our work with FC Cincinnati, being a pre and kind of post match spot and during the match be able to watch all the matches here. We needed that to be done. We had to bring in a bunch of sound engineers to be able to, we're in a 100-plus-year-old
Right.
building that echoes like crazy.
Yeah.
So
Crazy
that you
reverb.
can hear the commentators and the action. But yeah, and then I think the visibility of the Bengals' success last season, it brought a lot of people into the tap room.
Yeah, you guys watch parties very
Everyone's
well
tap room. I mean, it was like
Mhm.
that was
Great
good for
luster
the
there.
city.
Mhm.
Because Eric and
everywhere's
I were
busy.
here when the Bengals clinched, and that was one of the most amazing feelings in this building being there.
Yeah, and
Everyone was just
it was
off
so
the wall.
fun. I was at a brewery in my neighborhood that day.
Nice.
And that was like, it was such fun energy for Cincinnati, and I think that kind of put, Cincinnati and Rhinegeist on the map a little bit for some of these companies that were trying to, take advantage and capitalize on the legalized sports betting.
I think also with Lionel Messi joining Inter Miami, I've been seeing a lot of articles lately about how much more big, I guess, soccer is going to be in the United States. And I think that you're really going to see more fans of the MLS going forward, but especially on days when FC Cincinnati is playing Inter Miami, at least in the beginning. I know that when we first saw that he was coming, I texted both of them and I was like, so we're going to Rhinegeist, right? Because their tickets are now like $500.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous. But talk to us a little bit about, how you guys get to sort of celebrate with the city every time there's a game. That's got to be really, really exciting for you all.
Yeah, it's great. You can easily walk to TQL Stadium from the brewery, and we have our beer in the stadium, and we have a lovely partnership with them. They'll bring, the mascot's been in here a few times, and even just this neighborhood, right? Two of the supporter groups march from places right near here, and so the march to the stadium goes right past the brewery, and seeing that energy and seeing that success, we've had beer with FC Cincinnati back when it was USFL because they played in Nippert and we had beer at Nippert. So, there's all these sort of sports themes are sort of intertwining at this point, but it really is just, it's a fun way for us to connect to the city, and that the joy and sadness and, hopefully not too much, but anger and, everything that comes with being a sports fan, I think there's life lessons there, and being able to see, one of my favorite things is, seeing all the families that are in here for games, and you see, little kids, half paying attention, playing cornhole, but they're still part of that experience and creating those memories with their family.
Okay, let's talk about your next beer.
Yeah, so the next beer is Truth. Surprise.
Yes.
I heard about this one.
Yeah. It's hard to, it's one of these things I pretty much always, I love putting this beer in flights, even when it's people that have had it. I've certainly had my share, but I love it. It's still in my fridge. I've worked here for 8.5 years, and there's still always Truth in my fridge because it's comforting. I love it. I think it's just as good. It's honestly probably better than it's ever been. But I know you wanted to talk a little bit about our brewery and brewing, and I figured this was a great way to talk about that because one of the big things that's important to us is quality and consistency. And we say around here a lot that consistency is quality. You have to, making something, if you like to cook, right? Like making a dish once that's really good, that's awesome. That should be applauded. But being able to make that day in and day out, that's what separates, right, like me from, a chef, right? Like, yeah, I make something good in the kitchen every once in a while.
It's the difference between me and Skyline.
Yeah, but I can't, I don't have the consistency and the skills to be able to do that every day and on a budget and, with the right parameters. And, especially for us as we've grown, to be able to, somebody that sits down and has their first Truth in Milwaukee and then 2 months later comes and visits the brewery, I want them to have that same experience. I don't want them to say like, oh, this tastes totally different at the brewery than it does in Milwaukee or in, Tennessee. That's really important to us. And that's one of the things that having our production brew house helps us be able to do.
Talk to us a little bit about automated brewing in that way. It seems as though, I've never done it, so I don't really know anything. So feel free to correct and take over the conversation. But it seems like, from what I've gathered, it's mostly done by mixing in ingredients and pushing buttons and then just making sure that it doesn't, stop churning, right?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah. I certainly don't want to discount the work that the production team does, but there is some level of, when we talk about an automated brew house, what that mostly does is it's things like temperature, water volumes, those are all very precisely measured, timing particularly as well. If you're familiar with the brewing process, right, there's like a certain hop addition at a certain time. And with the automated programming, the brewers still have to have that ready. But it means that, okay, if it's a 15-minute hop addition, it happens right at that mark. And it's the right amount of hops, and it's the right types of hops. Now, like I said, the brewers have to load them in. It's not a bunch of robots walking around. But it also allows them to multitask. With the production brew house that we have, there might be 2 or 3 different beers kind of making their way through the system at one time. And that's much harder to manage if you have to micromanage all of those timings and, temperatures and water and all that stuff. Having some of that automated allows the brewers to, make sure the tanks are clean and make sure everything is happening the way it should. And it just brings an extra level of consistency to each batch.
Does it make the brewing process easier for people who may have less experience than someone who's doing it all by hand?
It makes it different.
Okay.
It's a different skill set. When you're brewing on, like in our tap room, we have the brew house that we opened with, and we still brew on it a couple times a week. It's very manual, right? You're hauling grain and you're graining out by hand and you're running around, and if you don't check your timer and you miss the hop addition, like there's no hop addition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to knock out on your own, all these things. That way definitely helps you understand, it's sort of closer to homebrewing in a lot of ways, where you can see like each step, because you have to do it and you have to understand, you have to fight with it a little bit more. It's a little bit more understanding how to solve problems that come up. But there's certainly problems that come up on the big brew house too. And in a lot of ways they can be worse. You might lose 3 batches if the brew house goes down instead of 1. And so there still has to be that base level of understanding why you're doing everything. Even if the automation, the programming is sort of making some of the decisions for you, and don't get me wrong, the recipes are all still written and programmed by us. So as if something changes, if we start to see over the last couple of years, malted barley has had a really rough crop. So the quality of some of the malted barley, the chemical parameters have changed a little bit. Higher protein, less starch, and so we've had to adjust our recipes. We're able to do that, but we only do that because of the feedback that our brewers are giving based on what we're doing.
Does it allow you to be a little bit more experimental?
In the sense that we give the brewers other outlets to do experiments. The downside to a large automated system is we have to find a home for those experiments. So that's why we used our smaller brew house to be able to make some experiments, really dial things in, and then things that are successful and that we think can continue to be successful, we'll scale up and brew them on the 60 barrel production brew house, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're talking about different states. So how many states are you guys in now?
10-ish.
Okay.
I was going to start naming them, but I don't want to. No, I think I probably can do it. We're in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee. We're in Illinois, a little bit of Wisconsin, Michigan. I didn't even count, so I don't know where I'm at. We're in West Virginia. We're in Pennsylvania. We have a tiny presence in Houston, actually, and in like the Boston area as well. I think that's might be 11.
Gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of the Midwest is covered. So
some other brewers' philosophies are opening tap rooms, and you guys all have stayed put here. Is there a reason why you haven't followed some of the other people's methods, or?
Yeah, I think for, and certainly I don't want to say that we learned really early that never say never is a good way to operate at any brewery, really. But so far we really value. I mean, we talked earlier about that, coming up the steps and having that experience. If we were to make another space, we want it to be that special and have some connection. And right now we haven't come up with what that might be. So, like I said, I'm not going to say we'll never have another location, but we're really happy with the location that we have and the neighborhood that we're in and the community that we're a part of. And, we're fortunate that we have the space and capacity to have grown to where we have, given we're in the same location we opened in. And to be able to still be doing that, we still have room for growth. That's in and of itself kind of an advantage. So, yeah, I mean, we like to think that we tell our story pretty well. And, I always tell people, come see us. We're in a bunch of states, but we're also not too spread out. You can drive to pretty much everywhere that we sell beer for the most part. So being able to do that is a really kind of I think that's really an advantage. You can say, if you're in Chicago, it's 5 hours. Like, come see us.
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Okay, let's taste this last beer. I know Noah's excited to try in this one.
Yes, I am such a sour fan.
Yeah, so this one's really new. It's called Paloma Tuesday, sort of a Paloma inspired sour. So this comes from our fooder program. So mixed culture, It's our house kind of culture of yeast and wild yeast and bacteria. This is grapefruit, lime, sea salt, and this was aged in tequila barrels.
Oh, cool.
So it spent some time in the foeder, and then it got some fruit, and then it went into some tequila barrels as well.
It's very good.
Yes.
Very good. I like it a lot.
And you know, a lot of people probably won't even know you're a sour people unless they actually come into the tap room itself, because you don't.
Yeah, I mean, like we're not putting beers like this in 6-packs, you know. So if you're shopping at your grocery store, you're not going to see this stuff for the most part. We do make some of these beers in 500 milliliter like cork and cage bottles, but like this one is draft only, and it's a tiny part of our volume. You know, it's really just an opportunity for us to play around and have fun.
So you said that you said that Truth was your flagship, largest seller. What would be some of your other ones that you sell on a regular basis?
Yeah, so Truth is, like I said, it's been around for our whole history. It's about 50% of what we make by volume.
Wow.
We also have Juicy Truth, which is a newer addition to the Truth family. We like to think of Truth as like our West Coast style flagship IPA, and Juicy Truth is our juicy hazy style flagship IPA. It's not as big of a percentage of our volume, but it's also much newer. And they're totally separate beers, just the same idea, right? It's like that Truth family. Mm-hmm. Cheetah is a big beer for us as well. That's our American lager. Just took gold at the World Beer Cup, so we're really proud of that one.
Congrats.
That's one of my favorites. So
yeah,
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, so that one's really really big. And then we also make some cider. We make some Rhinegeist beverages, RG Bevs. So things like Bubbles and Zango Crush, and those are that's sort of our play in the we don't make seltzer, but that's our that world, right? They're sugar fermentations with a bunch of fruit and a bunch of flavor. We seltzers don't have a ton of flavor, and so we wanted to do something with a little bit more to it.
Yeah, I remember when I first tried my first RG Bev. I can't remember. I don't want to say what it was because I can't remember exactly what it was, and I don't want to be like, oh, we don't do that. But I feel like it was much better than I had anticipated, simply because most times when breweries make something that's not a beer, I find myself a little disappointed, at least. Talk to me a little bit, I guess, about breweries making other sort of things. And I mean, you can understand why they do it. There's a lot of allergies around beer, like gluten intolerances. Also, there are people who just simply don't like beer. I had several dates in which that's the case. So talk to us a little bit about the thought behind that sort of thing that breweries will do. Is it inclusionary forward?
Yeah, I mean, at least I think for the most part, that's the reason. That's the reason for us. I mean, we've been making cider since 2016, and that was kind of our first foray into not beer. And the idea there was, okay, we know we want to offer cider. Well, wait, we can get a wine license and we can make cider, and we have, there's some legal things we have to do and permitting and things. Okay, step one. Step two, okay, can we make cider that we think is good? All right, let's try it. And okay, we like this cider, so okay, let's do it. And that's really the same thing with the RG Bevs. It was, okay, we're seeing these things. We're seeing that, there's this whole section of the grocery store we don't have anything in, right? And we're jealous, right? We're we want something in there. So it's okay, well, what makes sense? What can we make? What are we excited about? And what can we do? It was a really big challenge for us on the production side, just because we'd never done anything like that before. So we spent a ton of time, a ton of energy figuring out how to do it. And then also just a huge challenge for, our sales and marketing. We'd done beer and cider for so long. It was okay, how do we tell this story? And, I don't know that we've really fully nailed it yet. We're still kind of figuring out how do we talk about these things? How do we get people to try this? If you're shopping in that section of the store, do you even know who Rhinegeist is, right? And that's a challenge for us, which we're excited about, but it's it's funny too. I was actually just telling my wife over the weekend, I was drinking a Geist tea, which is our hard tea.
Mm-hmm.
When we decided we were going to make that, I thought it was really cool. I was like, hey, this is a cool idea. This is really interesting, the process. I'm not going to drink it. I drink so much of that stuff. Like, it's such a different experience, right? Like, and I like it because, like, man, I don't just drink beer. I like coffee. I drink wine. I drink cocktails. I drink hard tea, apparently. Like, I find that, like, some of these RG Bevs, they're a great, like, palate refresher in between beers because they are different, but they're not that different. But they bring different things to the table. I love fruity flavors. I love tea. I love lemonade. Like, depending on what I'm doing, we love, as Rhinegeist, having something for everybody. We don't make NA beer, but, like, you can get some at the tap room. We don't have the capability to make NA beer, so I don't see us doing that anytime real soon. But, we sell, root beer and soda as well, things for kids, and right, like, we have some snacks. You can get local cantina and get tacos. Like, we want to have things for people. We know that a lot of people come to Rhinegeist, maybe not just for the beer. Maybe they just came to watch an FC game. Maybe they came for a wedding that's their niece or nephew's wedding. So we want to provide stuff for them to have, but we're also, like, geisty enough. That's sort of a made-up word that we have.
I like it.
That we want to do it ourselves as much as we can. I mean, we screen print our own T-shirts.
Wow.
Well, it was great having you. I can't even begin to thank you. This has been an awesome experience, and thank you for coming on with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Cincinnati is so incredibly lucky to have you guys, and I'm a huge fan of you now even more than I thought I was. So thank you so much for having us.
Mission accomplished.
Cha-ching.
Nothing more I can say. Likewise.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Well, we're back, guys. How are you feeling after Rhinegeist?
Yeah, man, it was awesome. Chris was an incredible interview. He really knew his stuff. It was really, truthfully, one of the most fun conversations that I've had about craft beer, maybe ever.
Nice use of the word truthfully. Yeah. But,
It's all part of the plan.
Hey, you got a Cheeto in your lap, Cheeto.
Yeah, we got to
Yeah. I think he prefers a Puma, which, if I am not mistaken, they don't make. But
No, maybe someday.
Yeah.
someday, yeah.
But when we were walking in the building, just kept going back, and a bunch of offices, like, I knew this place is big, but I couldn't believe it was this big.
Over 300 employees.
I know, that's crazy. And they own their own freight to carry the beer across the several states that several states that they take it to, which is,
And like Chris said, they keep on looking for new people.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
not done growing.
Yeah. So, I think it was really cool. I don't really have a whole lot more to say. I felt like we had a lot of really awesome conversations during the show, and I'm really, really thankful that we were able to get to speak to them because they are such a vital part of the community with all the different types of charity work that they do, and the NIL deal is super cool that we talked about, and all that sort of stuff they're doing for the city is truly very impactful.
Until next time, guys. To our next brewery and venture in the future. I can't wait to see you guys next time.
Yeah, sounds fun. See you then.
See you then.
All right. Cheers. Thank you for listening to Blake the Brew Explorer podcast. This podcast was hosted by me, Blake Longfellow, Noah Jones, and Eric Berkshire. This episode was also produced by Noah Jones and edited by Noah Jones and Eric Berkshire. Want to join us on our brewery exploration? Be sure to subscribe to our show and follow me at the Blake the Brew Explorer on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. If you would like to be interviewed, please reach out to Noah Jones at nojocreative@gmail.com or me at blakelongfellow@gmail.com.